Okay, so I checked the sound in the previous podcast. It seems to be fine. So I will continue. So we are talking about cognitive biases, cognitive dissonance, motivated reasoning, bending the information. So we are continuing with motivated reasoning here. We talked about the bandwagon effect, also called mob mentality in a more negative way. But not all groups have the same susceptibility to groupthink. A group of individuals with similar backgrounds, beliefs, and perspectives can result in a limited range of ideas and opinions. Such homogeneity is an important cause of groupthink, particularly in small groups. In addition to homogeneity, groups tend to be more susceptible to groupthink when they are more cohesive, since a stronger sense of belonging and loyalty to the group can cause members to feel stronger pressure to conform to group norms and values. So if you're belonging to a group which has a lot of value for you in many contexts, and some contexts comes up where you don't agree but you have to join the groupthink to keep your membership and avail of all the other advantages of being a member of that group, then you will obviously feel a lot of pressure, direct and indirect, explicit and implicit. So here is a prop for groupthink. We agree 100%, it says, and absolutely so. We need more dissenting opinions as just a a way to say no, we are all together and so on. That looks like JFK Jr. here, so maybe we should check that, even though if this is the White House and he's the president, he would probably be yeah, I think it's JFK Jr. Doesn't matter, sorry, JFK. Okay, so where was I? Yes, so even amiability and camaraderie amongst group members can increase the likelihood that groupthink replaces independent critical thinking. So you agree with the friends and ignore your little quibbles about or discomfort about agreeing. Moreover, groups isolated from external sources of information are more susceptible to groupthink, since narrow input can provide a false sense of certainty that the group's decisions and actions are correct. Overconfidence in the group's ability to make and implement decisions and stress or time pressure are also important contributors to groupthink. Groupthink is also more likely in groups led by a dominant or charismatic leader who expresses a strong preference or opinion. So when we talk about facilitators and so on in adaptation and in sustaining the commons, or here in this book earlier we talked about how external partners have to be supportive and not enforce their views agenda on the internal group, whereas a charismatic leader, internal or external, can end up driving the group towards something that may be one's own personal bias or goal or ambition, and so on and so forth. So the core problem of the tragedy of the commons is that different people think and act differently concerning the use of limited shared resources in different situations. So Eleanor Ostrom suggests 4 main categories of people. Again, remember, I'm just taking texts, bits and pieces. This is not like I'm reading the whole book here, so you have to be careful to go back and fill in the gaps if you feel like I went from here to here in a discontinuous way. So what does Eleanor Ostrom say about categories of people? Those who always behave in a narrow, self-interested way and never cooperate in a dilemma situation, so they can be free riders. Those who are unwilling to cooperate with others unless assured that they will not be exploited by the free riders. Those who are willing to initiate reciprocal cooperation in the hopes that others will return their trust. And fourth one, perhaps a few genuine altruists who always try to achieve higher returns for a group. So this idea goes beyond this in terms of whether altruism is real or whether it's always reciprocal altruism. In other words, evolutionarily, altruism is not sustainable because it costs you, and in evolution you don't do anything that costs you, right? In terms of procreating and protecting and so on and so forth. So whether it's altruism or whether it also has an ulterior motive, let's say just to be nasty, we take the example of Mahatma Gandhi, who led most of the people in India to fight for freedom and got the freedom, and then there are lots of debates about whether the British gave it because of him or whether they were already tired and had to leave, and whether Gandhi was doing it purely out of altruism or whether he liked this tributary power of being, in charge of so many millions of people and so on and so forth. But without worrying about that, Ostrom's work comes based on case studies, so we can take her word at face value to say perhaps a few genuine altruists exist who always try to achieve higher returns for a group. So free riders will always be there, and people who worry about free riders will always be there. People who are willing to cooperate based on reciprocal altruism will always be there, and few altruistic people may also be there, but let's say it doesn't really matter. As long as reciprocal altruism works, we should be good, right? And as long as the free riders remain in small numbers. So different kinds of game theories are regularly used to explain these categories. They're also called social dilemmas. There is a prisoner's dilemma, coordination game, and so on. In the classic version pioneered by von Neumann and Morgenstern, the theory assumes individual rational actors, and so the theory assumes individual rational actors as participants and focuses on conflicting interests and how they behave if they are individual rational actors. Its most famous game is called the Prisoner's Dilemma, so we'll look at that in a minute, and I also discussed this in Eleanor Ostrom's book in the previous section, on section 3 on sustaining the commons. Although there are many versions, the game demonstrates the tension between individual self-interest and collective cooperation. Basically, two guilty suspects are brought in for questioning by the police, and each suspect is given the option to either stay silent or blame the other. If both suspects remain silent, they both receive a light sentence. If only one blames the other, the snitch goes free. It's called defection, whilst the silent one receives a harsh punishment because they don't have enough evidence to convict either one of them, so they have separated them and trying to manipulate them. They can even say the other one already admitted to your fault, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, the high reward for blaming the other and the high risk of staying silent motivate both to betray each other, resulting in a moderate sentence for both sharing the harsh prison sentence. Okay, so if both admit they were taking part in a riot, let's say, then both will get 3 months. But if one defects and the other one keeps silent, then the silent one gets 1 year sentence, a harsh sentence. So they both end up worse off being selfish than if they had cooperated. That's the main message of Prisoner's Dilemma. So here is the prop used, the proverbial prisoner's dilemma in a game theory, but there is also coordination game. So the rarity of global institutions and the overwhelming majority of traditional or customary institutions amongst all examples of effective institutions are not coincidences. The effectiveness of traditional or customary institutions is not only due to their generally more local scale, but also their social and cultural embeddedness. So attributes of the culture of the participants in any action arena and action situation makes a huge difference in the outcome. This is in Eleanor Ostrom's words. We'll read that in the next box a little bit more. It means that they are not only implemented through formal coercion, cooperation, exhortation, or combinations of the three, but also through shared norms that guide human behavior and keep group members in line through their innate desire to belong to and have social status within the group. More on that in the coming subsection. So this is about our tribal tendencies. We want to be part of a group and we want to belong, and there are advantages to this, but there are also times where you have to go beyond your cognitive bias or your cognitive dissonance to agree with the group. So can be both positive and negative. The same social and cultural embeddedness is difficult to bring about in modern society and seems impossible globally, yet it may be the only way to counter the tendency of human beings to discount global rationality for our own short-term local rationality. So people are moving around, they settle in different places, the cultural values get displaced or mixed, and different groups come with different cultural values and fight differently on the same issue, and so on and so forth. So before going to prioritizing social rationality, let's read this Fijian taboo system as an example. The traditional Fijian taboo system is a form of community-based system for governing the use of shared marine resources. There are many such examples. We have seen, we will see, or I have already recorded the managing of an irrigation system in Nepal, for example, and we have talked about shaming as one of the ways to put pressure on free riders, for example. It's been used in Fiji for centuries, but has recently attracted attention as an example of an institution that circumvents the tragedy of the commons. The word taboo means sacred or forbidden in Fijian, but also in most other languages, and some Polynesian languages of the South Pacific as well, and is the etymological root of the English word taboo, T-A-B-O-O-U, as opposed to T-A-B-U in Fijian and Polynesian languages. So this was first brought back by Captain James Cook from his travels through that region. The system is implemented by the chief or council of clan elders and involves setting aside certain areas of a reef or lagoon as taboo or off limits to fishing for different periods of time or permanently, depending on the reason and need. So it's collective management. It's deeply embedded into the social and cultural fabric of Fijian society and is strictly enforced through a range of mechanisms such as fines, shame, social exclusion, witchcraft, and spiritual beliefs. So it's a legal system of the time. The system prevents overfishing by allowing particularly important areas of fish stocks and other marine resources to recover and replenish. After the taboo ends, the area is reopened, but often with restrictions on the resource use. Were they really sustainable in this way? Well, at least the ideas were put in place to manage the fisheries sustainably, to leave them alone during their spawning period and growth period, and start fishing when they are ready to be caught, because they may be in a senescence where they are not breeding anymore, and so on and so forth. Empirical approaches, but many of them apparently worked. So now we have very intimately linked, complex, ambiguous, uncertain system of global communities that are all fishing out there in the open ocean with some kind of a legal system in place through the UN, but obviously enforcement is very difficult because policing the open oceans is almost impossible. So free riding becomes very easy, and lobbying for getting the rules bent to your advantage also is very common. So let's leave it here and come back and continue with the resistance to change and knowledge in the next podcast. Okay.